official statistics say that men between the ages of 16 and 74, just under 1 million per year in the UK, will be abused. And that's obviously the ones you know about.
Coming up on British Thought Leaders, author Jared Whitaker on surviving domestic abuse. Jared talks about the taboo subject of men being abused by women.
It's absolutely nothing to do with size, because abuse isn't about size, gender, race, nothing. It's about control. So it's about someone wanting to come into your life and control you in every way possible.
He explains the techniques used in abusive relationships.
A full-blown narcissist will take everything about you and use it against you. They will literally take any personality trait you have that they can play to their advantage.
Welcome to British Thought Leaders, I'm Lee Hall. Today I'm sitting down with Jared Whitaker, who is an author and domestic abuse campaigner. Jared, thanks for joining us.
Welcome, Lee. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So when people talk about domestic abuse, they generally think of men hitting women, but you're coming at this from the opposite perspective. How widespread is the domestic abuse against men?
Statistically, it's hard to say, because obviously there's the stigma around men where they don't come forward as much. But I think official statistics say that men between the ages of 16 and 74, just under 1 million per year in the UK, will be abused. And that's obviously the ones you know about. So I think rough figures, I think we're seeing lately, it's kind of 1-to-1 almost, for one woman, one man kind of thing. But obviously that's not seen.
I mean, you're a big guy. It's hard to imagine someone abusing, controlling you. Could you just talk us through what you went through and help us understand how this kind of abuse manifests?
Yeah, I think first thing I always tell people, it's absolutely nothing to do with size, because abuse isn't about size, gender, race, nothing. It's about control. Right. So it's about someone wanting to come into your life and control you in every way possible. And obviously, you don't go on a first date with someone and they start punching you on the first date, because you'll never have a second date with them. So it's this gradual grooming almost, where the behaviors start off with things like they isolate you from family and friends early on. They start gaslighting you and kind of twisting your perception of things. Criticism comes into that, emotional control, real psychological stuff. And generally, the physical abuse only starts later. And that was my experience, and that was the experience of every single man and woman I've interviewed so far for my books, has been that it all started off a different way, and then the physical stuff started. And I think, certainly in my case, and I think a lot of the guys I've spoken to about this, you don't consider yourself being abused until it becomes physical, even though you've been abused for years before that, with all the emotional, psychological, financial, whatever else is going on. So yeah, I mean, size is nothing to do with it. I think it's very easy to beat someone up when they won't fight back, so yeah, it's not a size thing.
So what are some of the other kind of common, apart from the physical abuse, techniques they used?
Gaslighting, trying to convince you of things that you said or did, trying to change your perception of reality. So, I used to get all the time like, oh, but you said this to me. And I'm like, oh, I don't think I actually said that to you. But then it's said with such a certainty and such, aggression, and, that you start thinking, well, I must have said that, and there must be something wrong with me, and it starts wrecking your mental health. You start thinking, oh, I need to go see someone, there's something wrong with me. And in reality, you do need to go and see someone, but just for the trauma of what you're going through. Just fear, fear of everything. I mean, I always use the word if when I talk to people. If you don't behave like this is going to happen. If you do behave like this is going to happen. So it's just this fear of, not just fear of violence, but fear of not seeing your children again, fear of being lied about to people in the community, maybe. A big fear that kept me from ever speaking out was, if you go to the police, they're not going to believe you because you're a guy. You're going to be the one that gets in trouble. So just, fear, lies, preempting. I mean, if we ever had an argument, and I mean, this again goes for everyone I've spoken to, maybe you have an argument and they hit you, and then they leave the house and they go out for the day. They've gone to every person in your life, family, friend, whatever, and told them that you've had an argument and you've hit them. Right. So if you now go and say something, you just look like a liar who's trying to stir the pot, because they've already been there, they've preempted whatever you're going to say. So it's just, I mean, their tools are never ending. I mean, I think in the one book I wrote about tools and techniques, and I've done a YouTube series on it, because there's just so many that they use. And it's so clever. I don't want to use the word, in a positive way, but they know exactly what they're doing. A big one that I find was used against me and used against everyone is triangulation, where they introduce a third subject into the relationship somehow. So it could be like the evil ex. Oh, my ex was so terrible. They used to do all these terrible things to me. They're so horrible. And you get sympathy for them because you want to protect them from the evil ex. And they use that. Or they introduce a third party as a rival. Oh, look at that guy. He makes more money than you. He takes his kids biking every Saturday. He's better than you. So that you try and be more like them because that's what they want. So it's very, very clever and very manipulative.
So I've known several people in my life who were in a similar situation to you, and they were brought up with this strong moral belief that men don't hit women, which is great. But when they're in this situation suddenly where their female partner is beating them up, they just have nothing in their toolkit to deal with that. What can men in that situation do?
Not much, to be honest. And I say not much because there are things you can do, like leave. Just leave. I think a very hard pill for men to swallow is no matter what you do in that situation, it's going to get used against you. So you could leave, and then they're going to run and they're going to preempt and they're going to tell everyone what you just did because you've left and now it's open for them to get on the phone to whoever they want. You could maybe grab them and restrain them and push them back against the wall. You're the abuser now because, oh, look, you attacked me. And that's going to be the narrative going forward about the day you attacked them, not the day they attacked you and you defended yourself. So I think there's this common misconception, especially when it comes to abused men, that they're just like meek little victims that roll over and get bashed about and never say anything back, never do anything back. And that's not the case. You might say lots back. You might end up hitting back, actually, sometimes, which obviously is not the right thing to do. But no matter what you do with a narcissist, they're going to turn it against you. So best thing to do is just leave. It's going to get turned against you anyway, but at least you're safe and you're out of there. And you can find out about things. I mean, it's so difficult because there's not one answer. It's not an easy, it's not an easy thing that you just go, oh, well, you were rude, I'm leaving. It's just so difficult. And especially when you're in the situation and emotions are going high, it's almost like an impossible situation to be in, and it's incredibly hard to get out. And I think for guys particularly, because of the stigma, they don't want to go and tell anyone, so they maybe will leave, but then they'll just go and sit in the car or something and go for a walk, so it's even harder.
Yeah, and the guys that I knew, they could hold their own in a fight against another guy. They weren't kind of meek or anything like that, but it was kind of the embarrassment that they've been beat up by a woman, so they would just take it in silence and not really talk about it. It's like, oh, where did you get that black eye from? I mean, what can we do as a society to try and change our culture a bit and deal with these things?
Well, I think it's about learning, right? People have to know. It's actually the third book in the series that I've released is called The Indifference of Good Men, and it's literally about how we have to stop being indifferent to what's happening around us in terms of domestic abuse. Learn how to spot the signs. So I've given kind of tools and techniques how to spot the signs of abuse and offer support to people, because people aren't going to come up to you and be like, oh, by the way, Lee, I'm being domestically abused at home. Can you save me? No one's going to do that, ever. So you have to learn to kind of read between the lines of what's happening. I mean, I would show up to work, fractured wrist, broken ribs, limping, things like that. And people would ask me, oh, what happened? Oh, sports injury, I was playing football, or I was doing this or something. And I look back at it now and I think, they must have thought I had a lot of sports injuries. Or did they think something was happening and they just ignored it? What's the case? So the signs are there to see most of the time. Sometimes they're not, but we have to learn about it. And I think if we all learn about it as well, people won't be asking ignorant questions like, oh, why didn't you just leave? Or, oh, you're both as bad as each other. And you'd feel more comfortable to come forward and say, well, actually, this is what's happening to me. Can you give me some help or reach out to something? And support organizations, I mean, I was reading the other day, there's roughly 38 support organizations that focus on male domestic abuse in the UK, and over 250 that focus on women and girls domestic abuse. And before anyone jumps on me, because they do every time I put something on Facebook or Twitter or anything, absolutely there need to be loads for women, and there need to be things in place, and domestic abuse against women is terrible, but there needs to also be those things for men. So men need to know that these places exist and we can come forward. Men want them to be anonymous most of the time because there is that embarrassment and humiliation that there shouldn't be, but there is. So there just needs to be, as a society, more education, I think, and more out there.
If we look at some of the things from that, the idea of men not hitting women, the idea of kind of suffering in silence, not moaning about stuff, just taking things and moving on and stuff. I mean, these are good characteristics of men. It's almost like those characteristics in this situation are being taken advantage of and used against them.
No, 100%. So especially like a full-blown narcissist will take everything about you and use it against you. They will literally take any personality trait you have that they can play to their advantage, your personality, your children, your job, things you do. They'll know that you were raised a certain way, so you won't hit a woman back. So they'll take advantage of that. And the problem is you go into a relationship expecting the best of the person you're entering a relationship with. So just like any normal relationship, you'll open up to them. Yeah. Oh, I had this trauma in the past, this terrible thing happened to me. And you're thinking you're sharing your burden with someone and, they're going to help you get through this. Well, they're just filing that away for, I can use that later. Now, that's a good one because that's a big thing I can hit them with because it's a deep, dark secret that they have. And everything you tell them just gets turned into ammunition. That's all it is. So, yeah, no matter what you do, no matter how you were raised, if you're not fully aware of this, which I don't think you can be unless you've experienced it, but you can have a really good understanding if you learn a lot, you're going in with eyes closed, basically.
So you've got 3 books on the subject. This one's called Why Didn't You Just Leave Them? Can you talk us through the meaning of the title and where that came from?
Yeah, so it's just things people say to you when you're in an abusive relationship or you've got out of it and you start talking to someone about it and they say, the subtitle is another ignorant things people say about abusive relationships. They say things like this, like, why didn't you just leave them? Oh, you must have actually liked it. Mm. Or things like, oh, it sounds like you were both as bad as each other. Or, just ignorant things because they don't understand. And this concept that people seem to have in their head that if you're in an abusive relationship, you can just get up and walk out. And that's the end of it. That's not the case at all. So that book is written from trying to educate people about why you can't just leave. And that's actually my story in there. So every chapter is filled with examples from my life of what happened and how I dealt with it. So it's basically learning about the types of abuse, learning about how abusers abuse you, and giving you tips for surviving when you can't get out, because sometimes you can't, and then how you maybe can get out and support you can get. But that's very much focused on my journey and kind of what I went through. But yeah, it's rife, the people who say things like that. I mean, I had people in my life say exactly that to me, and that's why I just thought, that's going to be the title of the book.
So you've got various ways people can find support in there, but how difficult is it to actually break free from these type of situations?
Immensely, immensely difficult. It's not a case of, like I said, you don't just stand up and walk out. It depends how, there's also, I guess it's almost like a scale of not how bad it is, because it can be, bad for you, it could be worse for you, how you handle things, but maybe you've only been together a couple of months. Maybe you've got children together and have been together years, and then just the complexities add on with things like that. So, even when you don't have children, people are violent. Like, narcissists are terrible. They'll threaten you. If you try to leave me, I'll kill you. If you try to leave me, I'll go kill your friend or something like that. So that fear keeps you in line. And I mean, for me, I was terrified. I was terrified of being humiliated, being embarrassed, get out. And I actually was lucky that I got arrested. And that's how I got out. I got arrested for her attacking me. And obviously she then lied and said I attacked her. And I got arrested because I was the guy. And in that moment, my worst fear came true. And I realized, well, actually, I'm still here. I'm okay. And then I was released, obviously, with no charges because I hadn't done anything. And after that point, I was like, well, I'm not scared of that anymore. And I just left.
Did that kind of open things up as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just kind of like, okay, well, the worst has happened. So now that's not a fear you can hold over my head anymore. So I'm just never coming back. And I moved into a hotel. So, yeah, it's really difficult to get out. And it's impossible to get out alone, I think. You need that support. But at the same token, the only person who's going to get you out is you. So you have to do it with support. But there needs to be support because it is a hard thing.
Yeah. I think with females, there's a bit more kind of camaraderie in these types of things. But for men, it's not easy to go and tell your friend of something like this.
I think for women, it's easier, like you say, to talk to maybe friends or family. It's maybe a little bit easier. For men, you just don't want to talk about it. I mean, I didn't tell my family or friends or anything. Some of them are finding out about it from reading the book for the first time. But it's pretty much just as bad, well, not just as bad for women, but maybe nearly as bad for women with the authorities. They're also terrible. I mean, that's a whole nother interview and a whole nother story about family courts and social services and things like that. But, they also come with, you had a choice, you could have just left. Because they don't understand it. They don't have the right knowledge around abuse and narcissism either.
I did want to explore that subject with you a bit, because I've had several guests on the show talking about family courts, basically saying if the separation happens, it tends to go in favour of the female. I mean, is this a threat that's used against male abuse victims a lot, that you're not going to see your children again?
Yeah, if you have children, it's the number one. It's like, and it's a horrible thing to think, and it's a horrible thing to say, but children to a narcissist are pawns. They're pawns in a game, and that's all they are. And they're they're not even pawns. They're the queen in the game. They're the best possible piece that they can use to control you, because, you have that fear of, if you do this, I'm not going to let you see your kids. If you do this, you're not going to have this or whatever. And you go into court to fight against it. And the courts are so antiquated in their approach to this that they look at you and they go, man, wrong, woman, must be the victim. And no matter what. I mean, you can come to court with a pack of evidence this big with photos, screenshots, text messages, whatever you want, and they can come and stand there and just be a woman, and it's immediately on equal footing, even though you've got evidence. So it needs to change. And I think the training that people in those, like judges, people in courts, police involved with it, they need up-to-date training. They need to understand it, because they don't understand it. They understand that domestic abuse is when a man hits a woman. That's what they understand of domestic abuse, and they don't understand the complexities, the lies, the manipulation, the control. I went into all my court appearances believing, when you signed the declaration at the bottom of your documents that you have to submit, which says these are all true, and I'll be committing perjury if they're lies or whatever. I took that quite seriously, to be like, well, if you lie, you're going to get in trouble. You might, But the court packs that were used against me were the biggest works of fiction on the planet. I mean, with stuff that is so obviously, a 4-year-old could read them and be like, oh, that person's lying. But nothing comes of that, because it's not about, family court just isn't about evidence. It's about who can tell the better story. And that's not how I think law should be to anyone. And as a victim, it makes you feel like, well, what's the point? Because even if I push for everything and I go through all the trauma of, getting a police case against them, it's just going to be, not believed or treated like this. So what's the point?
Do you think times are changing somewhat? I mean, 20 years ago, I can't imagine someone like you bringing out books on this issue, whereas now, it makes more sense. Do you think society is kind of moving in towards giving men more of a hearing on these things?
I think it's starting. I think we're right at the start of that kind of movement, but I think it takes people to now step up, come forward, tell their stories. There's been a couple of good documentaries on the TV recently about male victims of abuse, but for every one of those, there's about 10,000, showing the other side. And I think people just need to come together and realize that domestic abuse is terrible. It doesn't matter who it is that's getting abused. It's an awful, awful thing. So, you have female domestic abuse charities trying to wipe out male domestic abuse charities so that they get more funding, and just a lot of weird things like that. Instead of being supportive, and just inclusive and saying, well, let's stop domestic abuse. We'll raise awareness for women, you raise awareness for men, and we'll all make a good job and save people. It almost becomes this like little battle, and it's very strange to me that people would do that. I mean, it's such a terrible thing, I'll post stuff on my Facebook account or Twitter account saying things like, like, 1 million men got abused this year, and I'll have someone jump on and they'll be like, yeah, but 3 million women got abused, so who cares? And I always use the example with them. I say, if I say 100 people died in London today, are you going to say, well, who cares because 200 people died in New York today?
Yeah.
100 people still died. you should take that seriously and take the New York one seriously, not ignore the one because of the other. And that's the problem that we have to break through, ignoring the male domestic abuse thing because of the woman domestic abuse thing.
What kind of reactions have you had when bringing out these books?
I mean, generally very positive. I mean, the people that have read them, and I mean, I've had reactions from men and women that have read them, and just saying, I'm a no-nonsense kind of guy. I don't waffle. So there's the book. It's concise. It gets to the point. Tells you what you need to know. You can read my story. You can read the stories of other men. You can read the stories of men and women in the last one. They're there for you. Quick to read, easy to understand. And I've had people come back saying, you know what, these are actually the best I've read on the subject. Not to sound arrogant, but gives the information, gives it honestly. And actually, the best feedback I've had so far was people who've said, I've read books on domestic abuse and narcissism about men, and they all talk factually about, like, this is what happens, but none of them talk about how it makes you feel and how it messes with you emotionally and mentally, whereas mine very much focus on that, how you feel as a guy. So that was probably the best feedback I've had, that trying to tap into that, what does it actually do to you? Not just the fact that, yes, you can leave and go to court and do these things, which you need to know, but it's the problem is your mind gets messed up from it.
Is there a kind of sense of rebuilding yourself when you do finally break free from these situations and kind of building your personality back up again?
Yeah, and it's a weird one because, I mean, generally, like myself and most of the other guys I've spoken to that have got out of their relationships, you start again with nothing. You literally walk away with absolutely nothing. You kind of living in a bed sit, with a mattress on the floor kind of thing, and you've got nothing. So not only do you have to rebuild your entire life, like financially, your home, set that back up, your brain is still telling you things like, oh, maybe it was my fault, maybe it was this. And I mean, I'm years down the line, and I've still picked up really weird things, and I'm big on, I'll advocate counselling to everyone. Go to counselling, talk to someone, even if it's just to, I don't sit with my counsellor and ask her, for a million psychological tricks or whatever. I feed back what I'm thinking for the last few weeks, and it helps me then put it into perspective, and she kind of, helps me mold that into something thinkable, and I move on with it. And it really, really helps. And I think that's so important, because what you actually find when you get out of a relationship, when you've been with a narcissist, is you don't hear your voice anymore, you hear their voice. So, I mean, I was sitting years later thinking, oh, I want to order a new pair of shorts for the gym. And then the ones I liked, which were like the good, heavy-duty, proper ones, were like £45 or something. And I thought, I can't spend £45 on myself, that's ridiculous. And then I caught myself and I was like, well, actually I can. It's, I've earned the money, I can spend it if I want to. And then I realized, and I spoke to my counselor about it, and she said, well, it's not your voice, is it? It's her voice telling you that you can't have something because you were never allowed to have something. So it's learning to speak with your own voice again, I think, is a huge thing. And learning that not everyone is like that is a big, big thing. So I think most guys I've spoken to get out of the relationship and they think, well, I'm never ever dating again. I'm never getting in another relationship. I'm not going near a woman. And a lot of them actually do, unfortunately, go that bitter route where they get really bitter against women. But it's not women. I said something to someone the other day. I said, men aren't bad. Women aren't bad. No one of any race or gender is bad. Bad people are bad. So that's all it is that bad people are bad, and how do we identify them and move on? So I've moved on now. I'm in a new relationship, and it's such an eye-opener to be in a proper, wonderful relationship. And I'm looking at things, I often catch myself, saying to her, like, oh, I'm going to play some computer games tonight. Is that okay? She's like, why are you asking me if that's okay? Of course it's okay. And I'm like, oh, just checking. They said, but you don't have to check. I'm like, well, I used to. So, it's learning those things, but you can get out of it and you can move on, because not everyone's like that. But hopefully you move on with eyes open and look for the signs early on, which hopefully this gives men that power to do that as well.
Where can people go to find out more?
Either on Amazon. The 3 books are available on Amazon, or on my website, which is just jaredwhitaker.com. It's got all the links to all the books. It's got all the links to my YouTube channel where I do videos about the stuff, and all the links to all my socials if you want to follow me on there. And people can happily drop me a line if they want to chat about it. I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about it at any time. Even if it's just one guy somewhere that thinks, okay, this guy sounds like, maybe I could talk to him. I'm happy to do that. I'm not a counselling service, but I can do what I can.
Jared Whitaker, thanks for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lee.